Alex Anthopoulos has done a fantastic job of building this core to be able to win for years to come. But is it time for him to step outside of his comfort zone and make that big move to put this team over the top? I'll answer that question and many more on today's Mailbag episode of Locked On Braves. So let's get into it.
You are Locked On Braves, your daily Atlanta Braves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, welcome back to Locked On Braves, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, where we cover your favorite Atlanta sports teams each and every day. I'm your host, Jake Mastriani. Make sure you follow me on social media at Shortstop Ball. You can check out the podcast there as well at LockedOn_Braves, where you can submit questions, comments to be answered and read on episodes just like this one, where I'll be answering all of your questions that were posted on X at LockedOn_Braves. If you're watching this on YouTube, please do me a favor, hit that subscribe button, join our community here, and hit the thumbs up button. Leave me a comment down below, as it does help the show out a ton whenever you do that. If you're listening on the audio version, you can help out by leaving me a 5-star review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. It is our weekly mailbag episode. Got 20 questions to get into, a lot of them surrounding Alex Anthopoulos and his unwillingness to go out and make that big move, that big free agent deal, trade, whatever it may be. Is it time for him to step up and do that, or will he ever? I'll answer those questions and a lot more on today's podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Well, let's jump right into the questions, because as I said, we have a lot to get to on today's episode. 20 questions that I'm going to try to go through. The first one coming from Dustin Mounts, who says, Braves were reported as one of the finalist teams in the Crochet trade market. Seeing how much Boston gave up, what would your trade haul for Crochet been from the Braves, and would you have completed the trade if you could for it? So, touched on this a little bit yesterday. I don't think the Braves could have matched what the Red Sox gave up, because they maybe could have equaled the first piece with Kyle Till and Drake Baldwin, although no, Till is viewed as a higher prospect than Baldwin. I'm not necessarily in love with either of them, but that would have been somewhat equal to top 100 prospects by many in the industry out there. But they couldn't match Braden Montgomery, who, again, had he not gotten hurt at the end, he still went very high in the draft, but had he not gotten hurt at the end of the season at Texas A&M, he may have gone even higher. And there's just a lot of upside with him. The Braves didn't have that second piece to pair with Drake Baldwin, position player wise. I think the best deal you could have maybe given for Crochet would have been Baldwin, AJ Smith-Shawver, maybe Jose Perdomo, because they're looking for those position players, and then a Nacho Alvarez. But again, even that I don't think beats what the Red Sox gave them. And I think many of you probably wouldn't have done that deal. I would have, because I'm very high on Crochet. I think he's going to be a stud, Cy Young type of pitcher, top of the rotation guy. That would have also, if I'm making that deal, I need to get him locked up. I need to extend him, for at least another 4 or 5 years. So, but no, I don't think the Braves could have matched that. I don't know what level of interest the Braves had. And I don't want to throw shots, but you got to remember who reported that as well. But maybe one thing it does tell you is, I guess I did just throw a shot, so I apologize. One thing it does possibly tell you, though, is that the Braves are willing to make trades. They're willing to give up significant prospects. If let's just say they were in the Crochet sweepstakes, whether or not they were one of the finalists. I saw somebody else report that there really wasn't a second, that the Red Sox offer was far and above better than anything else anybody else had offered. But let's just say the Braves did have interest. They did make an offer. And let's say they were willing to trade a Baldwin or an AJ Smith-Shawver. We don't know that. But like I said, in order to even be in competition for Crochet, I think at least one, if not both of those guys had to be in the discussion, which tells me the Braves are willing to move some of those guys to make a deal. So again, that's somewhat encouraging. And again, unless you really love those guys and don't want the Braves to trade them, which look, I like those guys too. I'm not necessarily saying you have to get rid of them, but to get somebody of the level of Crochet, and again, as much as I believe in them, I would have done it. Agon, with the free agent market so high, do they end up overpaying to trade for a starter or try converting another reliever like Hoffman to a starter? I've always thought the Braves were going to, if they were going to make a big upgrade this offseason, and it's always the case for the Braves because they're not going to get in the free agent market, it's going to be through trade, especially if they're wanting to get under the tax. Now, if Jeff Hoffman was willing to take a $10 to $12 million a year deal, something similar to Ronaldo Lopez, maybe a 3-year deal for $35 million, kind of similar to what Clay Holmes got. And the Braves see him as somebody that could move back into the rotation, then that makes sense. And that wouldn't necessarily blow up your budget if you're viewing that as your starter that you're getting. But that's risky. I don't know if Jeff Hoffman can do that. Like, I didn't think Ronaldo Lopez could do that. So again, I just don't know, and that is a risk. But I could see, again, if he was willing to take that Lopez or Clay Holmes type of deal, then I think that could be a route that the Braves go to get their starter. Cats Buckeyes, assuming it continues, which of course is impossible to predict, is the lack of activity thus far this offseason an edict from AA or from ownership? I think it's more a response to just the prices this offseason. I mean, some of these prices are just beyond ridiculous that we've seen so far, higher than a lot, especially on the pitching side, a lot higher than what was predicted. And I think teams are just more willing to spend this offseason. I think last offseason there was all the confusion, questions about the TV contracts, which is how these teams make a lot of their money. And now that we have some clarity on that going forward, I just think more teams are willing to spend. It's driving up the prices because you have more teams willing to spend, more teams willing to go after these players. It's driving up these prices, and AA is not somebody that's going to respond to that. He's going to pay what he thinks the value of a player is, and he's not going to go beyond that. So I don't see it so much as an edict from Alex or the ownership that they can't go out and do this. I think it's more of just the off season that we're in, and that there's a lot of teams ready and willing to spend money, and it's driving up these prices. Cats Buckeyes, do you think the Braves are too attached to their max AAV? If they ever want to sign a big free agent, they will almost assuredly have to go over. It'd be unsightly for a player like Adames to make more than Acuna and Riley, but that's the business. And it is the business. I think players have to understand that. And I think at some point, you're going to have to go beyond that $22 million AAV that Alex seems to be stuck on, capped at, not really wanting to go over that because, I mean, there was probably a point where you never thought they'd go to $22 million a year on a player. So at some point, you're going to have to go beyond that. I do think Alex's biggest fear as a GM is having a dead long-term contract, having an Anthony Rendon type of contract, just having that long-term deal. You're paying a guy $25 to $30 million a year, and they're injured all the time. They've regressed to the point that they're unplayable. I think that keeps Alex Anthopoulos up at night because he seems so afraid of doing that type of deal. And look, I mean, let's be honest, a lot of those long-term deals don't work out. But at some point, I think you have to go out and do one of those to take that chance, to take that risk, because what else are you going to do? You already have all of this talent locked up. At some point, I think you're going to have to go out and make one of those deals. So yes, he will go over 22 at some point, but I do think that there is just this, I don't even want to call it an issue, because I do think for the most part, it is smart. You don't want to get stuck in one of these long-term contracts with a lot of dead money. But again, I think he is so scared of doing that it has kept him from giving Freddie Freeman an extra year, giving Josh Donaldson an extra year, which was smart in hindsight, not doing that. So again, there's some situations where, I think it was smart. There's some situations where no, it wasn't smart. But I think he's just so scared of that long-term deal that is going to bring down the team that it's kept him from doing some of these other moves. Matt, I feel like A normally plays the free agent class, but this year they are playing him. Players aren't taking those contracts early at discount rates. I'm not sure A knows how to navigate when his game plan is thrown off, hopefully not waiting for the scrap heap free agents. I think this goes back to what I talked about a minute ago. I think this offseason market is just blown up beyond what many of us thought it would be because there's so many teams that are willing to spend. We didn't see that last offseason for the most part, especially on the pitching side. But I think this offseason, there are just more teams in the market willing to spend, and it's driving up these prices, and AA is not going to go. He's not going to play in that. TS Studios, do you think AA will make a move for a pitcher with the free agent prices or just go with what they have now? Sell Lopez, Schwellenbach, Anderson, Elder, Holmes, Strider. I do think a move will be made at some point for a starting pitcher. And as I've said, it doesn't have to be a top of the rotation guy. It doesn't have to be a Crochet. That would be great. And that would make this the best rotation in baseball, I believe, with everybody healthy. But it doesn't have to be that. It can be a Charlie Morton. It can be a Jose Quintana. It can be just somebody to help give you innings because, again, as I've said before, what it ultimately comes down to is when you get to the end of the season, and hopefully you're in a postseason spot, is Sale healthy? Is Strider healthy? Is Lopez healthy? Is Schwellenbach healthy? I mean, you can get all the pitchers you want, but unless those four guys, at least three of those four guys are healthy come postseason time and ready to go, we've seen what happens. It's not going to matter. Of course, some of that is because the offense hasn't shown up in the offseason either, or in the postseason either. But again, you can go out and get whoever you want, and it'd be great to get a top of the rotation guy, but it's not necessary in my opinion, because ultimately it comes down to the aces that you have. Can they be healthy and ready at the right time at the end of the season? All right, a lot more questions to get into, some more on the free agent landscape, especially around starting pitcher. We'll get into the rest of these questions here next. You shouldn't have to worry when you're looking to purchase tickets to your next big event, and you don't when you use Gametime. Gametime is a fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. They have killer last-minute deals, all-in prices you can filter right there in the app, and you get the view from your seat and their best price guarantee. The Gametime guarantee means if you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. I use the Gametime app whenever I'm going to a Braves game. In fact, I'm getting ready to take my nephew to a bowl game coming up here in Birmingham soon. Please don't tell him it's a Christmas present. So I'm going to be checking out the Gametime app and seeing what deals I can get for that game. And again, sometimes those deals get better right up until the last minute of the game. I love using the Gametime app. You will too. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Thanks as always for making Locked On Braves your first listen of the day. Go check out Locked On MLB for your second listen, as solely getting you caught up with everything happening around Major League Baseball this offseason. Let's jump right back into the questions here. Sydney73 says, realistic expectations for Schwelly next year now that teams have a little tape to go off of. Look, I don't want to get too excited about Spencer Schwellenbach here. I just don't know that I see much regression coming. You look at the numbers, you look at the expected stats. Nothing was fluky about what he did last year. He had a 3.35 ERA. He had a 3.44 xERA. So, okay, it's a little bit higher. He had a 238 xBA. All right, that is a good bit higher than his 226, but I think that's mostly because he gets a lot of weak contact, similar to Max Fried, who had a 245 expected batting average against. And those types of pitchers who just pitch to weak contact, sometimes their xBA is going to be higher than their actual batting average against. Both the Mets and the Phillies saw him 3 times last year, and he just got better and better against them. You know, I expected maybe that second, third time that those teams saw him that they would have figured something out, but they didn't. He was still amazing against them. So again, I'm not saying the guy's going to come out and pitch to a 3.3 ERA again, but it's not impossible. I don't think it's impossible. I would still predict him to be 3.5 or better, a 3.50 ERA, a whip under 1.1 because he doesn't walk anybody. I still think that's realistic for Spencer Schwellenbach because nothing he did last year was all that fluky, and teams that saw him a second and third time really weren't able to adjust that much to him. And I still think he's a young kid that is growing and learning. I think he can up his strikeout total if he wants to. Now, I think he's a guy that, like Fried, sometimes will pitch to contact to try to work deeper into games and get that weak contact, and he's fine with that. But I think there's an ability in there for him to go out and strike out 10 per 9. I think he has that in him. So, again, I don't see much regression, if any, for Spencer Schwellenbach next year. I think he's that good. Again, he's still a kid that is learning how to pitch at the big league level. We talked about that a lot last year. He was making adjustments on the fly last year at the big league level, and he still doesn't have a lot of innings under his belt as a pitcher. I think there's a chance for him to just continue to improve and even get better. Now, I'm sure there will be some adjustments to him, and he'll have to adjust back next year. But again, had the Mets and Phillies, who saw him on multiple occasions in big parts of the season, he pitched in some of the biggest games of the season last year. Had they made improvements to him and gotten better the second, third time they saw him, and the second and third time through the order when they saw him for the second and third time, then maybe I'd be a little bit more worried about him having some aggression next year. But that just wasn't the case. It felt like he got even better. So I'm a firm believer in Schwellenbach, the pitch mix, the control. Not even control. He has command. He knows where these pitches are going. The reason I don't think there's going to be much regression for Schwellenbach next year. Kathy G, Braves added to their international staff. Could it mean something in the works we're not aware of, out of their norm? Yes, I'm probably dreaming a little. I don't know that it means anything is necessarily in the works, but they certainly need to start hitting on some of these international bats. If they're going to continue to go pitching heavy in the draft, they have to start hitting on these international bats. And look, it's still a little early to say on some of these guys, but an Ambiorz Taveras, Luis Guanipa, Jose Perdomo, they've got to start hitting on some of these guys. They need these international prospects to come up and be some big time hitting prospects. And we haven't seen that yet. Again, I'm not giving up on any of those guys I just mentioned or some of the others, but they certainly have to do a better job of identifying, and it's hard to do. You're talking about judging 14, 15-year-olds. I'm not going to go into the international prospect process because I think it's kind of icky. But they got to do a better job, bottom line. So I think that's all that's saying. Scott Switzer says, of the starting pitchers out there, who would you prefer to add and why? Burns. I mean, I would prefer Corbin Burns out of all the ones that are available. It sounds like he's either going to go to the Giants or the Blue Jays, and it's really sounding like he's going to go to the Giants for more than Max Fried got. Jack Flaherty would be the next. Burns, Flaherty would be the free agents out there that I would go after. I'm a believer in what Jack Flaherty did last year. That kind of next level, Walker Buehler, Nick Pivetta would be two other arms that I like. And then even further down, what I was kind of mentioning earlier, just getting somebody to come in and help throw you some quality innings. Jose Quintana, Charlie Morton, and I'm somewhat interested in Lance Lynn. But again, those would all be, veteran guys just looking on a one-year deal to kind of help you eat some innings. On the trade market, again, don't know what all exactly is available to those names that we've heard over the past week. Dylan Cease, obviously, I was very interested in him last offseason, although dealing with the Padres, I feel like that's never a good idea. And then Mitch Keller from the Pirates, we had a question on him in a minute, but those are a couple of the trade targets that I wouldn't mind going after. Richard Cooper sent me an email with a question, which you can do as well, shortstopball8@gmail.com. Am I crazy for thinking that if we were in on Nola, we should be in on Burns? Now, I think Burns is a Boris client, so let's just suspend that. But Burns became a regular starter at 26, 167, 202, 193, 194 innings, and all other stats are significantly better than Nola. So this is a good point. I feel like I said this on the podcast, and I'm not saying you have to listen to every word that I say, and I'm certainly not calling out Richard here. I can't honestly remember if I said this on the podcast or not, or if it's just something I thought. But I've at least had this thought before, and I agree 100% with you, Richard, in the fact that if your motivation for being so aggressive after going after Aaron Nola last offseason was because of his durability, would you not have that same level of intensity to go after Corbin Burns, who has been just as durable and reliable over the last 4 seasons and has been even better than Aaron Nola? I mean, I think you should be. And look, I'm not saying with these prices that we've seen get pushed up, even higher than we thought. I mean, Corbin Burns might get $250 million coming up. I don't think the Braves are going to pay that, but I do think they should be in on Corbin Burns. And maybe they are. We don't know. The Braves, keep everything tight-lipped. But I 100% agree with you. If the reason that they were so willing to spend money on Aaron Nola is because they believed in his durability long-term, I feel like you have to have that same level of interest in Corbin Burns for the same reasons. A guy that's been even better and more consistent than Aaron Nola. But look, Burns has been reliable, and every pitcher is reliable until they're not reliable. So again, that's always going to be a concern. But if the Braves were that interested in Aaron Nola and willing to spend that level of money on him like we haven't seen them spend before because they felt so comfortable in his durability, then yeah, I'm right there with you. I think that should be the same reason that they go after Corbin Burns. AAWX says, do you think AA is losing faith with the fans when it comes to letting cornerstone pieces of the team walk? I'm not asking if the deals are good or bad, but simply from a fan perspective, because under it doesn't seem like we will have that Chipper Jones type player. I want to do a deeper discussion on this because this is something that I've been thinking about recently as well. It'll probably be next week unless we actually have some big news to talk about. And again, I know you said not talking about if the deals are good or bad or not, but I think there are real reasons for why he let Freddie, Dansby, and Freed walk. And I think some of those reasons are justified. But I am concerned, and I'm not so much as concerned about the fans' side of this, although I think that is part of it, and we can discuss that further. I'm more concerned of what does this say to young players coming up in this Braves system, knowing they want to be like Michael Harris, from Atlanta. I'm sure he wants to be here for his entire career, but he knows if I get to free agency, I'm not coming back. I mean, you have to know that as a Braves player now that, hey, if I don't sign one of these team-friendly extensions before I hit free agency, I'm going to be gone. Because if I go to free agency, they're not going to bring me back because I'm going to get a better offer from somewhere else and I'm going to take it. And I think that's what kind of worries me. And again, I know I said I was going to talk about it on the podcast, but that's just a preview of what we'll likely talk about next week. Is Dan or AA's unwillingness to lock up these homegrown guys, what effect is that having on the fans? What effect is that having on the players going forward? And some of the leadership in the clubhouse too. All right, we got a lot more questions to get to, several more questions to get to. We'll take one more quick break and then we'll get back into those. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You can also go over there and click on the MLB tab. They have odds out for World Series, league winners, division winners, some of the awards out there. They don't have Cy Young. I was really interested to see where they were going to put Chris Sale, home run props, strikeout props, and all that you can see at FanDuel.com. Also, make sure you visit FanDuel.com/playsafe for tools and resources to help you stay in control of the way that you play. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Let's get right back into the questions here because I got several more that I need to get to. Next one from Our Theme to Life. Assuming that most of this Braves core remains intact, how many year window do you think the Braves can still be competitive and win championships before it starts to close? I'd say at least through 2028. That's the last guaranteed year that you'll have Ronnie, Riley, Olsen, Murphy, Strider, and Schwellenbach. And that I expect to still be a pretty strong core. Now, a lot can happen between now and then, but that's the last year that you have those guys locked up for. And so for me, 2028 right now is kind of what I would say at least the last window for this Braves team to compete. Not saying they can't beyond that, but just with this core, I think 2028 is the year that I look at to say, okay, we need to win another World Series before then. Or I think it might change, it might shift. There might be a new core at that point. But with this core and this group, I look for 2028 as kind of being that last year. Let me know if you disagree on that. 2027 is the last year with Ozzie, but I love Ozzie, but Riley, Olsen, and Acuna, to me, that is the big core, and Harris. That is the big core going forward for this offense, and then building that pitching staff around Strider and Schwellenbach. That is the core for me going forward. PJ's Braves trying to keep it optimistic. Who do you think will be the team MVP of 2025, and who has the biggest bounce back year? I think Austin Riley is going to be the team MVP. I've talked about him a lot already going into next year. I mean, his numbers from June 1st on until he got hurt last year, they were Austin Riley like. I just think he's going to have a big season. Michael Harris would be my second choice for that. I thought last year was going to be the year for Michael Harris, and again, he just couldn't stay healthy. But I'm looking for that season for Michael Harris. It's kind of similar to what I talked about with Acuna in the past. Just give me that one full healthy season. Let me see what Acuna can do. I feel like I'm getting there with Michael Harris. Just let me get that one full healthy season to see what he can do. But I feel like Riley, Michael Harris, those are the two guys right now I'm looking at that I think are going to have monster 2025 seasons. Dustin Mounts, per reports from Sasaki's agent's interview, he might not want a large market team with a lot of media presence. This is from the interview that was on Bleacher Report. What would be your pitch to him to join the Braves if you had to recruit him? First of all, the Braves are a large market. They may not act like it, but they are a large market. But my pitch to him would be, the Braves have historically been viewed as one of the best well-run organizations in all of baseball. They keep everything in-house. So if you wanted things private, Braves don't let anything leak. They are a team that is ready to win. Like I said, they're in a win now window right now and for pretty much the rest of this decade. And they're known for having a great clubhouse environment. That would be my pitch to him. I don't think he's coming to the Braves, but that would be my pitch. Our theme live, what is the projected WAR for each starter in the lineup as of right now? And are you taking the under or over on each player's projection? So Michael Harris, 5.2. He is actually the highest projected player next year. Now, a lot of that's because of his defensive ability. But I think, that, again, like I just said, I think Michael's going to have a monster season. So I'm okay with that. Ronald at 5, I might actually take the under just because I think we'll be happy if Ronald played 120, 130 games this year. So I just don't know if he's going to be able to accumulate that. So I'd actually take the under on that. They have Riley at 3.9. As I just said a minute ago, I think Riley's going to have a big season. So I'd take the over there. Ozzie 3.5. I think that's about right. Olsen at 3. I think he goes over on that. Murphy 2.6. I think he goes over on that. And again, I'm a Murphy believer. Ozuna 2. They have him at 2 WAR. That's including a huge negative defensive value. And if he does play a lot of defense, then maybe that does bring down his WAR, which does include defense. But I think he's going to be a good offensive player again. RC 1.4, Kelnick 1. I'd hope there's an over on that. I think that's probably about right for RC. I really hope it's more than 1 WAR for Jared Kelnick. On the pitching side, Sale 4.5, and then they have Schwelly, Strider, and Lopez all at 2.7. So I'd predict more than that for probably all 3 of those guys. But either way, I think not many teams are going to have those projections, and I think some of those are going to be higher than they're already projected. LeBronathan Jr., how would you feel about Jared Jones or Mitch Keller as potential trade candidates? Keller especially seems like a player AA wouldn't have to give up too much for. I don't know if I agree with that. I'm a fan of both those guys. Would love to have either one of them. I just have to think the price would be high. You're talking about guys who are cheap and controllable for a while. I would have to imagine that the asking price is pretty high for both of those guys. And I don't know, like the package I said earlier for Crochet, I wouldn't give that package up for either of these guys, even though I do like them. But to me, they're not those top rotation guys. They are, 3 at times, number 2 starters, in my opinion, which is still good and solid. And I'd be willing to give up a nice package for, but I wouldn't include Baldwin and AJ Smith-Shawver in a deal like that. Maybe one of them, but not both. Hayden Harris, is staying under the luxury tax worth bringing in the risk of letting another year in this championship window slip away due to lack of depth? No, it's not. And again, as I said on the podcast the other day, I truly believe that this roster is good enough to win a World Series as is. I think you can make no moves, and this team could win a World Series, but that's risky, as you said, and it's not worth that risk when you have this group that is ready to win a World Series, to not build around it, to not get the best possible depth that you can. It's not worth that risk. And I think AA will do something. We just have to be a little bit more patient. Jacob Cole, do you think that eventually early contract extensions like the ones MH2, Strider, Acuna will stop getting signed by players because of how high the free agent market is? If so, will AA start to give out contracts to free agents? I don't know that one necessarily has anything to do with the other. There is risk in these deals. Look at Acuna. While I'm very hopeful he's going to come back and be Acuna again, he's had 2 major knee surgeries, and he may never be the same. But you know what? He's already got that financial security. $100 million, that's nothing to scoff at. Look at Spencer Strider. Yeah, I'm hoping he comes back and he's still as deadly as he was before, but that's now 2 major elbow surgeries. But you know what? He's already got that financial security. So there is definitely risk involved in doing these deals early on, and players saying, hey, I never know what's going to happen. Injuries are going to come. I'm going to go ahead and get my guaranteed money. And I still think for the team side of things, it's great if you can get these team-friendly deals and lock these guys up early through their best years, through their 20s, early 30s. I think that's still a good risk on the business side. So look, there's risk both sides, but I think there's also very much a reward for both sides as well. Getting that financial security and the team that's signing them being able to lock them up through their best years. Waldo, for an organization who is so stingy on not going over market value for any player, how do we sign any notable players now that everybody is getting overpaid? We don't. Is the simple answer to that. We don't. I've said this several times. Until he does it, I'm not going to believe it. And AA is not somebody that is going to pay over what he thinks a player is worth. He's just not. We've seen it in the past. He's not going to. Last question, this one from Mike Brooks. The Braves are a cash cow, but yet AA is cost-cutting and not spending after saying the payroll was going up. Could the Braves be up for or close to being sold? I have no knowledge of that, so I can't speak to it one way or the other. I don't think so. It's certainly been an unusual offseason. As you said, there's been cost-cutting, but there hasn't been any cost. There's been nothing to replace that with. However, as I mentioned on the last podcast, there is still a lot out there that he can do. And so I think we have to be patient and give him some time because there are still a lot of big moves that could be made. And so before we, go down this road that AA is doing nothing this offseason, talking about the team possibly being up for sale, cutting payroll, whatever the case may be, I know it's almost Christmas time and the New Year's is getting here and nothing major has been done. And that's been unusual from what we normally see from AA. But I think we're just going to have to be a little bit more patient this offseason because, look, we get to January, February, and all these names are off the board and we haven't done anything, then yeah, let's have this conversation. But I think we're going to have to be a little bit more patient this offseason because it is different this offseason with all these teams spending and AA not getting those deals done early like we're used to seeing. It's going to be a little bit different, but I still believe that AA is going to get it done. All right, thank you all so much for joining. I know there were a couple of questions in there I wasn't able to get to for those who are here live. Joseph's recap, could we still get Cody Bellinger? We could, and I saw a report that the Cubs would be willing to eat some of his contract. And if that is the case, then it makes it a little bit more viable. But for me, they'd have to eat, $7 million of that to make it and not really give up much for me to take on Cody Bellinger. But not the biggest fan. Also from Joe's recap, do you think the Braves are still looking at lefty pitching in the trade market? Left, right, I don't think necessarily matters to me. I think they're just looking for the best deal to upgrade the rotation. Thank you all for being here live. Floppy, Jeff Berry, Todd Schwelly, Joe's recaps. It's a little bit of a different time frame for me to go live, but I appreciate you hanging in there. Doug as well, BC in there as well. David Agnesia, thank you all for joining me here live. Hope you all have a great weekend. Make sure that you are subscribed to Locked On Braves. Make sure you follow us on social media at Shortstop Ball, at LockedOn_Braves, SoCal Brave. I see you in there as well. Thank you for being here. And make sure that you make Locked On Braves your first listen each and every day. And go check out Locked On MLB for your second listen of the day. Make sure that you rate, review, and subscribe to the Locked On Braves podcast wherever you get your podcast. And we will talk to you next time.